Why has film photography experienced such a resurgence over the last 5 years, the last two or three especially? 5 years ago, you could pick up some of the best film cameras for peanuts, but many of them have more than tripled in price, especially over the last 2 or 3 years. It's not that long ago you could buy a nice Hasselblad for between £600 and £700. Now you'd probably be looking upwards of 2,000. With 35mm film cameras like the Nikon FM, FM2 going from around £100 to £200-300 and more for a good one. This is my Nikon F3, which I've had since the 1980s. Absolutely love this camera. It was a different time then, through the 80s and 90s and 70s, of course, and before, because photography was about photography. Now it's all about the gear. If you think that this camera was introduced in 1980 or 81 and it remained in production until 2001, there were professional photographers who, depending on what type of photography they did, who maybe had 2 or 3 F2s and then maybe they acquired a couple of F3s and they could continue to use the same camera for well over a decade. In fact, they need only change it if it got damaged beyond repair, to be perfectly honest. Now, when you look at the likes of Sony and Nikon and Fuji, they seem to be releasing new cameras every 6 months, and it's all about upgrading the camera. Add to that, as those of us who know how to use Photoshop and so on, we're fully aware what can be done with it, how you can dramatically change a mundane scene into something very interesting. So it's become more about digital creativity, and with the advent of AI technology, we're even seeing images that are just created that don't exist. There are photographers now who are worried that within 5 years, a lot of the work that they do will cease to be required. When you use a film camera, you are literally going back to the roots of an art form. I know that there are many photographers out there who simply shoot on film and then perhaps get it developed and then scan the negatives or slides and then continue on in a digital dark room. Okay, that's nice too. Myself, how I like to do it is to actually shoot the film, develop the film, print the image in a chemical darkroom the way that I like, to a reasonable size, either 10 by 12 or 12 by 16. And then once I have the finished print, then I can have that professionally scanned for archiving and that sort of thing, so that each image is true to the original skills of the darkroom and the photography process as a whole. 35mm is still as popular as ever because it's not only practical and convenient, it also has a unique look to it. The certain amount of grain that just gives it that retro look, a look that many film photographers like. Film also has increased dramatically over the last few years. In fact, the resurgence has actually caught Kodak and Ilford by surprise, and Kodak have been rushing to ramp up their production to meet demand. There are even photographers, wedding photographers, who specialize in shooting just film. If you're thinking to get back into film and you've started looking at cameras, all I would say is don't run before you can walk. Use a 35mm camera like a Nikon FM, FM2, F3. In my opinion, the best Nikon film camera was the Nikon FA, because that had the best metering system of all film cameras at the time. So that makes a big difference. You will get a much higher success rate with your exposure. If you're thinking about moving on to medium format, you may be looking at 6x6, perhaps a twin lens reflex camera. The Mamiya C330 is an excellent place to start because they're still pretty good value. They have an excellent lens choice and the image quality is fantastic. You may be looking at a Hasselblad and thinking, oh, if only I could afford one. I wouldn't really buy a Hasselblad unless you really want that format and that camera, because you will invariably be cropping the image to get a more attractive looking rectangle image. So your finished result will be from a portion of the negative that will be, say, 6x4.5 or 6x5, in which case it defeats the object. Traditionally, for studio camera work, the 6x7, the Mamiya RB 6x7 was the choice of professionals. If you see the negatives or slides on a light box of a 6x7 compared to 6x6 or 6x4.5, they just stand out. It's not the ideal camera to be carrying out and about for landscapes, but if you do so, the results are well worth it because the image quality is so good. And then moving up from that, again, to meet with demand, there's a startup company that appeared a couple of years ago called Intrepid. They have come up with a fantastic new LED enlarger, which has built-in dials for color photography and for multi-grade paper. The controller has a built-in safe light. It's small and it comes without a stand, so you can actually mount it either on a tripod or you can just buy a copier stand and mount it on that. It's very good, and astonishingly it can print up to 6x9, and they even make a 4x5 version as well. Intrepid have also started making 4x5 inch field cameras and 8x10 field cameras at a very good price. I believe the 4x5 camera is around £300, something like that, and it's absolutely beautiful. But once again, I wouldn't jump straight to that. I would start off with 35mm, get yourself a developing tank from eBay and start to shoot and develop your own films. You could then move on to making contact proofs with those negatives, which again, you don't need an enlarger for. You just need an even light and 3 trays and some chemicals, and you can do that yourselves. And then perhaps once you've got a nice selection of films that you've shot at a later date, you can look at moving on to an enlarger so that you can print those images yourselves at home. And I would only then, once you've really worked through every aspect of 35mm, then I would move up to medium format. And yes, I am also itching to go out and try a 4x5 camera and an 8x10, but that does take a lot of dedication. It's a lot of effort to take one of these cameras out with you, to set it up out in the field and do everything that is required just to get one image. But the beauty of that is when you do finally take that image, you will ensure that that image is perfect, and that's the beauty of it. And even medium format can whip any digital camera in terms of ultimate resolution in image quality. But once you get up to large format, nothing can touch it. It has a unique look, a unique quality. It's not just about making giant size images. It is about making images whatever size you wish, but the quality will be out of this world. I will be making more videos about analog photography because it really interests me, and I know that there is a lot of interest out there. If you have any questions about anything to do with cameras, film photography or digital photography, by all means, feel free to get in touch, and I'll see you next time.